What if I told you that most leaders aren't failing? Let that land for a second. Most leaders aren't failing. They're showing up, they're getting results, they're earning respect from their teams, they're doing their job. And that's exactly the problem, because there's a place, a really comfortable place, where competence becomes a ceiling. Where doing the job well starts to feel like enough. And far too many leaders settle there, not because they gave up, but because nobody told them there was more. Today we're going to name that place. We're going to talk about why it happens, what it costs you, and more importantly, what it looks like to move past it. Because the difference between a leader people respect and a leader people remember isn't talent. It's not title. It's not even results. It's a choice, one that most leaders never realize they're not making. Stick around and I'll tell you what that is. Welcome back to the Modern Leadership Solutions podcast, where we help you lead with clarity, intentionality, and confidence. I'm your host, Tom DeBell, and I'm glad you're here. Before we get into today's content, I want to take just a moment to acknowledge something you may have already noticed. The show has a new name. We're moving forward as Lead with More, and today's episode is really the heartbeat behind that name. Because leading with more isn't about doing more. It isn't about working harder or adding more to your plate. It's about becoming more, growing in ways that make everything you do count for something beyond the task in front of you. That's what we've always been building towards on this show. The name finally just caught up. So, all right, let's get into this. I want to start with a question I'd like you to actually sit with for a second. Think about the leaders who have had the greatest impact on your life. Not the most famous ones, but the ones in your actual story. Maybe it was a boss early in your career, or a coach, a mentor, a parent, or a teacher who saw something in you that you didn't see. Now ask yourself, what made them different? What made them impact your life so significantly? Was it their title? Probably not. Was it their track record of results? Maybe, but that's probably not the first thing that comes to mind. My guess is that the first thing that comes to mind is something harder to define. The way they made you feel, the way they pushed you, the fact that they seemed genuinely invested in who you were becoming, not just what you were producing. That's the thing about the leaders we remember. They weren't just doing a job. They were doing something to us, building something in us that outlasted the role they were in. That's the standard we're talking about today. And it actually starts with being honest about where most of us really are. This exercise of reflecting on your own experience can really help you visualize the impacts a leader has on someone's life. There's a concept in leadership development, and I'll reference John Maxwell here for a moment. There's a concept around what's called positional leadership, or as Maxwell calls it, level 1 leadership. If you've been listening to this podcast, you've heard me talk about this many times. It's the idea that some leaders lead primarily from their title or their authority. Do what I say because I'm the manager. Follow my lead because I'm in charge. Now here's the thing, positional leadership isn't evil. It actually is where everyone starts. You get the role, you establish your authority, you prove that you can do the job. That's appropriate and necessary. The problem is when leaders stop there, when the title becomes the strategy, when influence gets confused with authority. And honestly, it's an easy place to stay because you can be quite successful there by most visible measures. You're meeting your numbers, your team is functioning, nobody's complaining, at least not loudly. Everything looks good on the surface. You're a good leader, or good enough. But here's what good enough costs you, and your team never tells you this directly. It costs you depth. It costs you loyalty that outlasts a paycheck. It costs you the kind of influence that doesn't require a title. And over time, it costs you the very thing that every leader says they want, lasting impact. So, what actually separates a leader people respect from a leader people remember? I like to think about it this way. Respect is transactional. I respect you because of what you do, what you know, the results you produce, the position you hold. Respect is earned and it's legitimate, but it's also conditional. It tends to follow the title. When the title goes, a lot of that respect goes with it. I talked about that in the last episode. Being remembered, on the other hand, is relational. People remember you because of who you were to them, how you led them, what you saw in them, what you asked of them, and what you modeled in front of them. That doesn't go away when you change roles, and it doesn't expire. The leaders who move from respected to remembered aren't necessarily more talented, they're more intentional. They've made a decision, sometimes a quiet, private decision, that their leadership is going to be about more than the output. It's going to be about the people. And that decision changes everything downstream: how they handle conflict, how they give feedback, how they show up on a bad day, what they're willing to be honest about, whether they invest in the growth of their team even when there's no immediate return on that investment. That's the gap, and it's not a talent gap, it's a growth gap. It's a decision gap. Now, I want to talk about something that doesn't show up on performance reviews, but it shows up everywhere else: character. Skill gets you the role, character determines what you do with it. Here's what I've noticed. Most leaders invest heavily in skill development, communication, strategy, execution, time management, all of it. That's good. Those things matter. But character development, that's often the last thing on the list. It feels less urgent, less measurable, less immediately relevant to hitting this quarter's numbers. But here's the reality. Character is what your team experiences when things get hard. Character is what's in the room when nobody's watching. Character is the thing that either makes your values real or exposes them as talking points. Now, servant leadership, that is putting your people before your own comfort and convenience, isn't a personality type, it's a practice. Values-based leadership isn't a mission statement on the wall, it's the decision you make at 4 p.m. on a Friday when you're tired and it would be easier to cut corners. That's the inside-out work of leadership, and it's where the most significant growth actually happens. The leaders who leave a lasting impact aren't the ones who had the most charisma or the best strategy. They're the ones who committed, and I mean genuinely committed, to becoming someone worth following, not just someone worth reporting to. So let's get practical. If you're listening right now and recognize yourself somewhere in this conversation, maybe you're a solid leader, you're good at what you do, but something about today's episode is pulling at you. Here's where I'd start. Get honest about your current growth, not your team's growth, yours. Most leaders are very good at identifying what their team needs to work on. Much harder is sitting down and asking, where am I plateaued? What leadership habit am I avoiding developing because it's uncomfortable? Where am I leading from my title instead of my character? If you've never asked yourself these questions, these answers may be slow in coming. But you don't have to have those answers today, but pick one, just one, and sit with it this week. What is one thing you can do to start building your leadership character? If you're still stuck, reach out to me. I'd be glad to help you find a starting point. Intentional growth doesn't start with a formal program or a system. It starts with a moment of self-awareness, a moment where you decide that good enough isn't actually good enough for the leader you want to become. That's what it means to lead with more. It's not a productivity strategy, it's a growth mindset. It's a decision to keep growing for your team, for the people who are watching you lead, and for the long-term impact you want to have as a leader. The leaders who leave a lasting impact aren't always the loudest in the room, the most credentialed, or the most decorated by conventional measures. They're the ones who chose to keep growing when staying comfortable was the easier option. They're the ones who decided their leadership was going to be about something more than the role. And then they did the quiet, consistent work of becoming that kind of leader. That's what this show has always been about, and it's what it means to me to lead with more. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you gained some insight Please hit the like and subscribe. It really helps this channel. And I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, keep leading with more.